pull up a chair. Let me tell you a story about a 4,000-year-old warning. It was written down by the very first people who ever learned to write, pressed into wet clay with a sharpened reed in a language that no living person has spoken for thousands of years. And here's the strange part. That warning is not about a war. It is not about a plague or a famine or a flood. It is about power, a specific short list of powers that the oldest civilization on Earth believed were so dangerous, so far beyond anything a human being should ever control, that they took them out of human hands entirely and gave them to their gods for safekeeping. They built their whole world around that idea. Their religion, their kings, their cities, all of it rested on the belief that certain powers were simply not ours to hold. And tonight, 4,000 years later, I want to walk you through that list. Power by power, because once you see what was on it, you are going to notice something that is very hard to unnotice. One by one, quietly in our own lifetime, we have been picking those powers up. I am not here to tell you their gods were real. I am not here to sell you on ancient astronauts or lost magic. I am here to tell you something stranger and harder to shake, that the first people who ever thought deeply about power left us a warning. And we are living through the exact moment it was warning us about. Stick with me to the end, and I will show you all 5 of the powers they sealed away and exactly where each one is resurfacing in the world right now. Some of these will surprise you. The last one is already in your pocket. Come on, let's go have a look. Let us start with who these people actually were. We call them the Sumerians, and they lived in the hot, flat river country of what is now southern Iraq, in the land between 2 great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. The Greeks would later give that region the name we still use, Mesopotamia, which simply means the land between the rivers. And it was here, around 5,000 years ago, that human beings did something they had never done before. They built the first real cities. They wrote the first laws. And they invented writing itself, the first time in history that a thought could be frozen in clay and read by a stranger 1,000 years later. So these were not simple people. They were the founders, the first civilization we know of, and at the very center of how they understood the world sat an idea so unusual that it still stops scholars in their tracks today. The idea of the May. Now, the May are difficult to translate because we have nothing quite like them. The closest you can get is to say they were divine powers, but not powers in the sense of magic spells or superhuman strength. The May were more like the operating rules of civilization itself, the authority behind every important thing a society could do. There was a May of kingship, a May of truth, a May of the crafts, the work of the carpenter and the metal worker and the builder, a May of music, a May of writing. There was even, and this is important, a May of the destruction of cities and a May of grief and lamentation. Sit with that for a second because it is the key to the whole story. The Sumerians put the power to build a city and the power to destroy one on the very same list. They did not separate the good powers from the terrible ones. They understood that the full toolkit of an advanced civilization included both the power to create and the power to annihilate, governed by the same divine framework, treated with the same deadly seriousness. And here is the strangest detail of all. The May were treated as physical things, objects you could hold in your hands. They could be picked up, set down, stored in a temple, and even stolen. They were kept, the texts tell us, in the temple of a god named Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh water, in his sacred city of Eridu. Whoever held the May held the legitimate right to run civilization. They were, if you like, the master keys to the world. Which brings us to the oldest heist story ever told. There's a Sumerian myth, written down at least 4,000 years ago, about a goddess named Inanna. She was the goddess of love and of war, beautiful and ambitious, and not at all content to sit quietly. And Inanna wanted the May. so she traveled to Eridu, to the house of Enki, the old god who kept them, and she sat down with him to drink. Enki, flattered by his powerful young guest, called for a feast. The beer flowed, and as the night went on and Enki grew drunk and generous, he began to hand the May over to her, one by one. The power of kingship here, take it. The power of truth, the crafts, the arts, the priesthood, here, all yours. Inanna accepted every single one and quietly loaded them onto her boat. When Enki finally sobered up the next morning and realized what he had given away, he was horrified. He sent his servants chasing after her to get the May back, but it was too late. Inanna had already sailed home to her own city of Uruk, the master keys of civilization in her hold, and she would not give them back. And so, in the logic of the myth, the right to run the world passed to a new city. Now, why does a 4,000-year-old drinking story matter to you and me? Because of what it tells us the Sumerians actually believed about power. The May were not strength. They were permission, authorization, the legitimate, sanctioned right to do a thing. What Inanna stole was not raw force, it was the authority to wield it, and the Sumerians believed deep in their bones that some of these authorizations were never meant to sit in mortal hands at all. So let us open that sealed list, let us look at the powers they guarded most fiercely, and let us see where each one is turning up today. The first, and the one they protected above almost all others, was the power to create life. In one of the oldest creation stories ever found, a text called the Atrahasis, the gods grow tired of doing their own labor. So they decide to manufacture a worker, a new kind of being, and the way they make it is chilling in its detail. The mother goddess takes clay, ordinary clay from the earth, and she mixes it with the blood of a god who has been killed for the purpose. From that mixture of earth and divine blood, the first human beings are shaped. Life, built to order by careful design. And another Sumerian text takes the idea even further. It describes the gods experimenting before they got it right, making test versions of humanity that did not work. A being that could not hold its food, a being that could not have children, failed drafts set aside before the final working model was approved. In other words, the ancient texts describe the creation of life not as a simple miracle, but as a technical process, trial and error, prototypes, revisions, expertise. For almost the entire span of human history, that power stayed exactly where the Sumerians put it, out of reach. The idea of a human being reaching into the blueprint of life and editing it was not even a fantasy worth discussing. It was the territory of gods, and gods alone. And then came November, in the year 2018. A scientist in China stood up and announced to the world that 2 baby girls had been born whose genetic code he had personally edited before birth, using a tool called CRISPR, not edited to treat a sick child in front of him. Edited at the very root, in the embryo, in a way that those changes would be passed down to their children and their children's children, forever. For the first time in the history of our species, a human being had reached into the human blueprint, rewritten a line of it, and let that rewrite loose into the future. The world recoiled. The scientist was condemned, put on trial, and sent to prison because he had crossed a line that nearly every country on Earth had quietly agreed never to cross. And yet, the line had been crossed. The door the Sumerians sealed 4,000 years ago, the power to design life itself, is no longer sealed. It is open. The only question left is who walks through it next and how carefully. And that is exactly where I want to stop and hear from you, because this is the power we picked up most recently, and it is the one that still frightens people the most. So here's my honest question, and I read every single comment on this channel. Out of all the powers we are walking through tonight, which one do you truly believe human beings were not ready to pick up? Which one should we have left sealed? Tell me down below and tell me why. The conversations you start in those comments are genuinely how I decide what we dig into next, so do not be shy. Say your piece and then come back, because the next power on the list is the one humanity has been chasing the longest, because the second sealed power is the oldest dream we have, the power to live forever. The Sumerians were absolutely clear about this one. A long human life was a blessing, but life without end, life beyond the boundary of death that belonged to the gods. And the greatest story they ever told is built entirely around a king who refused to accept it. His name was Gilgamesh, and he was the mightiest king in the world until the day his closest friend, a wild man named Enkidu, fell sick and died. Gilgamesh had never truly looked at death before. Now he could not look away from it. The thought that he too would one day simply stop and rot and be forgotten drove him half mad with fear. So he set out on a desperate journey to the edge of the world, searching for the one man who had ever been granted the gift he wanted. A man named Utnapishtim, the survivor of a great flood to whom the gods had given eternal life. When Gilgamesh finally found him, the old immortal took pity on the exhausted king and told him a secret. At the bottom of the sea grew a plant, a thorny plant that could restore lost youth. Gilgamesh tied stones to his feet and sank down into the deep, and against all odds he found it. He held the cure for aging in his own 2 hands. And then, on the journey home, he stopped to rest beside a pool of cool water. While he slept, a serpent slid silently out of the water, drawn by the scent of the plant, and ate it. As it slipped away, the snake shed its old skin and left it behind, renewed, made young again. And Gilgamesh woke up with nothing. He had held the power to defeat death, and he lost it, and he went home to his city to die like every other man. That is the oldest long story ever written down. And its message, pressed into clay before the pyramids were finished, never changed. The line between a human lifespan and an endless one was placed there on purpose. Reach across it, and it slips through your fingers. So look at what is happening right now. There are laboratories, very well-funded laboratories, working on exactly this. Scientists are developing drugs designed to hunt down and clear out the aging cells in your body. Others are studying the tiny caps on the ends of your DNA that seem to control how your cells age. Others are freezing human bodies at the moment of death, betting that a future age will know how to thaw them and switch them back on. This is not a fringe hobby anymore. It is a serious field, pouring in money from some of the wealthiest companies that have ever existed. The plant of youth that slipped away from Gilgamesh 4,000 years ago is being hunted again, in earnest, with budgets that would make a king weep. Now to the third power, and this is the one the Sumerians wrapped in the most fear of all, the power of total destruction. In their stories, the most devastating force imaginable was never something a person could simply pick up and use. The great catastrophes, the world-ending weapons, the floods that wiped the slate clean, these belonged to the assembly of the gods and were only unleashed after the gods met together and decided as a council that it must be done. Destruction on that scale required deliberation. It required agreement. It was never, ever meant to rest in the hands of one being acting alone. And this same idea astonishingly shows up on the other side of the ancient world, in the great epics of India. There, the texts describe a divine weapon called the Brahmastra, a weapon of such terrible power that it could lay waste to entire armies and scar the land for generations. And the epics are explicit. This weapon belonged to the gods. To aim it at the innocent, to use it in rage or in pride, was a violation of cosmic law itself. In the story, when it is finally misused, the punishment is monstrous. The very power to create new life, to bear children, is stripped away from the one who broke the rule. The weapon of mass death answered with a curse of mass barrenness. Two civilizations, thousands of miles apart, who never met, arriving at the very same conclusion. The ultimate weapon belongs to the heavens, and a mortal who seizes it is committing a kind of blasphemy. And then, on a desert morning in the year 1945, mortals seized it. In the half-century that followed between 1945 and 1996, human beings detonated more than 2,000 nuclear devices just in testing, just to see what they could do. And today, right now, as you listen to this, the nations of the earth hold more than 12,000 nuclear warheads between them. We did not just reach up and take the weapon the ancients reserved for the gods. We mass-produced it. We handed it out among rival nations, and we aimed it at every great city on the planet. The fire that the old stories said could only be loosed by the agreement of the entire divine council now waits in silos, ready to be loosed by a handful of mortal men in minutes, which leaves the final and the most subtle of the sealed powers. And I think it is the one hiding closest to you, the power over the word, the power to control how human beings understand one another. The Sumerians have a haunting little myth about this. There was a time, the story says, when all of humanity spoke a single language. One people, one tongue, able to understand each other perfectly, working together without confusion. And then the god Enki, for reasons the story never fully explains, spoke into the mouths of mankind and changed their speech. He put contention into it. He scrambled the one language into many, so that neighbor could no longer understand neighbor, and the perfect unity of humankind was broken forever. If that sounds familiar, it should. It is almost exactly the story of the Tower of Babel, told 1,000 years before the Bible wrote it down. And notice what kind of power it describes. Not a weapon, not a plague. The power to reach into how an entire species communicates and to control it, to decide what people can and cannot understand. The ancients understood that whoever holds that power holds something close to the power of a god, because they control the shape of reality itself as it lives inside people's heads. So consider where that power sits today. Right now, invisible systems decide what more than 5 billion people see when they pick up their phones. They choose which words reach you and which ones never do, which ideas spread like fire and which ones quietly vanish unseen as if they were never spoken at all. And we have now built machines that can generate words and voices and faces that are impossible to tell apart from the real thing. The power to shape how an entire species exchanges information, the power the Sumerians said belonged to a god, is no longer a divine secret. It is a setting in a piece of software. It is a product. So step back with me for a moment and look at the whole sealed list at once. The power to create life, the power to extend it past its natural end, the power of total destruction, and the power to control how all of us understand the world. 4 powers the first civilization on Earth looked at, decided were too dangerous for human hands, and locked away in the houses of their gods. And 4 powers we have in a single human lifetime, pried open one after another. Now, I want to be careful and fair here, because this is the part that actually matters. The Sumerian priests who dreamed up the May were not trying to frighten anyone into obedience. They were trying to describe something true, something structural about the nature of power itself. Their insight was this: certain capabilities are so far-reaching that their consequences spill far beyond whatever the person holding them intended. The power does not care if you are wise. It does not care if you understand it. It works the same way in clumsy hands as in careful ones. And so, they reasoned, powers like that cannot be trusted to any single person or any single moment of bad judgment. They demand oversight, patience, the agreement of many. They demand wisdom equal to their strength. And the Sumerians were not the only ancient people to see it. There is an old Jewish text, the Book of Enoch, that tells of a group of heavenly beings called the Watchers, who came down and taught humanity knowledge it was not yet ready for. the making of swords and weapons, the secrets of sorcery, the reading of the stars, the crafting of cosmetics and charms to deceive. And the result, the text says, was not progress. It was ruin. Humanity took the knowledge but not the wisdom to carry it, and the world drowned in the consequences. The very same lesson told again. And the Tower of Babel itself is one more echo. Humanity grows powerful enough to build toward heaven, and the response from above is not to destroy them, but to limit them, to take away their ability to coordinate that power before it goes too far. The same warning, rising again and again, from culture to culture, across thousands of years. It is almost as if our ancestors were trying very hard to tell us something. Not about gods, about ourselves. Because here is what the people who pressed these stories into clay understood, and what we are still struggling to learn. The danger was never whether we are clever enough to take hold of these powers. We have answered that question. We took the power to design life. We are reaching for the power to outlive death. We built the weapon of the gods, and we hold the keys to the human mind. We are clever enough. We were always going to be clever enough. The question the tablets actually ask is the harder one, the one they spent their whole civilization trying to answer. Now that we hold these things, do we have the wisdom to match them? Has our judgment grown as fast as our power? Or are we exactly what the oldest stories warned about, a young species that learned how to take down the gods' own tools from the shelf, long before we learned how to carry them? Those first scribes never knew us. They could not have pictured our world for a single second. But they understood the one thing that has not changed in 4,000 years, the terrible distance that can open up between what a creature can do and what it is ready to do. They left the warning in the most permanent material they had, hoping someone someday would read it and understand. We are the someone. This is the someday. And whether we are ready is still, even now, entirely up to us. If you want to keep pulling these old warnings up out of the clay, the secrets the first civilizations buried, and the questions they were really trying to ask, then subscribe and turn on the bell, because that is exactly what we do here. The tablets have a great deal more to say, and we are only just beginning to read them. I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay curious.